Good evening, beautiful humans, and welcome to another Sunday night soul session of the Transgender Mentor. If you watch this either live with us right now or you come and watch this on the replay, first of all, let me say thank you so much for helping us grow this channel and to support this content. Listen, we're living in a time that is stressful in many, many ways. But to your fellow human beings that identify as transgender, this is an exceptionally tough time. We are being thrust into the spotlight because us, like most, most groups that are discriminated against and bullied and dehumanized, are tired. And we just want to be seen as human beings, and we want to move and be in the world with the same rights and the same considerations as all human beings are supposed to have. So we thank you once again, myself and my beautiful co-host, Pamela Topjian. Now, we have a balance on our host and co-hosting because Pamela is a cisgendered woman and I myself am a trans man. And this dynamic, brings us to some very powerful discussions. And we're going to have another one of those powerful discussions tonight. Tonight, we're going to talk about transphobic attitudes. We're going to talk about how to overcome negative stigma in trans healthcare. And we're also going to talk about trans kids and how to be the best parental ally possible. I heard something once that was so just moving to me. I heard a trans parent, a parent of a trans child, say, I would rather have a live son than a dead daughter. Now that's powerful because many times we come to something that we don't understand with fear, and we come with prejudice and judgment because instead of expanding and instead of, immediately seeing an opportunity for growth, we do that thing that the brain does when it says, nope, this is different. I shut down. No. And tonight we're going to learn about some of the origins of those attitudes and the place that comes from. But don't worry, because no matter how you've been raised or what you don't know or what you fear or what's happening in your world and in your family, anything and everything that comes in your path is meant for your expansion. And so when we learn how to look at the circumstances in our life from a place of growth, man, we really expand our whole consciousness. And in that, we become a light unto the world. So once again, thank you so much for being here. If you're watching us on Facebook, please share the video out if you have people that are, questioning trans friends, or share this with your family if you yourself are a trans human being and you want them to have a better understanding of you, how to treat you, and how to just be in a family. And if you're on the YouTube channel, well, thank you so much. We're desperately trying to grow that channel as well. There's a lot of freedoms there. So make sure to like this video, share it out still, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're so grateful. So if you guys are ready to get into this Transgender Mentor Sunday night soul session with me and my beautiful co-host, Pamela Topjian of Breakthrough Hypnotherapy, well, I can guarantee you we are ready. So let's go. Happy Sunday, Pamela. Thank you so much
Hi.
once again for being here. I'm super grateful always to have you here on this show with me.
I'm so
So,
honored. Thank you.
no, really, thank you so much. All the work that you do for this platform and the Recovery Soul Food platform, it's just amazing to for you to be exactly who, the demographic in a lot of ways that we're talking to, in that you represent, you know, a a a, a demographic of human beings that may say, I don't understand this. I, you know, I don't know what to do, so I'm just going to bow out of all of it or
Right.
make a rash judgment.
They feel like they have nothing to do with it. So
Right.
it's really interesting because we all have something to do with it.
Yes, we do.
With every community because we are human. We are here on the world.
Yes.
And like I've said before, if people feel like they don't know anybody, I guarantee it you do. You
You
just don't know it.
absolutely do. You just
Yeah.
might not know it, and that's for sure. So let me say, good. I was going to say good morning. I'm so used to saying good morning. Good evening, Zoe, Craig, and anyone else that I can't see. StreamYard only shows me so many. If you want us to see your comments, please make sure that you give StreamYard your permission.
Mm,
Um, Once again, I'm honored for all the people that join me here, especially from my recovery platform, because,
yeah.
in my opinion, my humble opinion, my gender transition and my recovery process are so much the same, and they are together. And because I can't tell one without the other, without the healing of
Right.
recovery, I could not have had the courage to step into my true identity and embrace myself. So without that healing, I could have never have embraced myself. And at the same time, the resistance to be who I was in a world that tells me I'm not supposed to be this way was part of why I was so heavy into active addiction, to cover up that hopeless feeling of maybe never matching my head, my heart, and my body. So there's a lot of other human beings in the world that are just like me. We don't talk enough about recovery in the LGBTQ plus communities. We just don't, and I hope that this will change. But tonight, I believe there's something to be learned here and something to be embraced here for everyone, regardless of what community you identify with, or where you are, because what we're learning in the world right now is how to be more human. And that means connecting with one another. Because, like you said in the beginning, where we think we're separate, we're really not.
No.
We are not. And for for so much of the community with transphobic and transphobia attitudes, it comes a lot from a place of misinformed religion. And, I'll start this out by giving a pretty bold statement. You know, who are we to question what that higher divine plan is? And if you start seeing a lot of the same people and communities rising up, there's likely a bigger and more divine reason for that. Whether it be the recovery community, whether it be the trans community, or the LGBTQ plus community rising up, there's something to be learned from that. And that bigger divine plan brings us together in love and acceptance. So I know that's a bold statement, but it most truth is bold in its statement. So, if you had to answer what is transphobia to you, what does it mean to you? What would that be? What would your answer be there, Pamela?
Well, to me, that means people that are afraid of something that they don't understand. They don't know
Mm,
about it, and so they just dismiss it. And our a phobia is a fear, really.
yeah.
And so sometimes people, when they're afraid of something, not only do they just step back and act like it doesn't exist, but they also will push against it sometimes. It's just, I think it depends on the personality. You know,
Mm,
some people will push against it and, stand up against it with all the hate and, you know, with just all the hate and violence, even. Um, but that's what transphobia is to me. People who are just like, I don't know about that. It seems odd. I don't want anything to do with it. And then some people go even further and say that's not right. There's something wrong with that. And, these people shouldn't exist. And, all the violence that happens.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And you nailed it too, because I even looked it up on in the dictionary, and it does. It says the fear, hatred, disbelief, or mistrust of people who are transgender, thought to be transgender, or whose gender expression doesn't conform to traditional gender roles. Now, in once again, this is just this is my thought from a bigger perspective that I generally try to look at things with, is that those very hard-nosed gender expressions, that it's either this or this and that's it, you know that has caused so much suffering in our society already. I mean, from the time a child comes into the world, we as its parents, we begin to put it in those boxes of gender. And for a lot of children, they grow up just fine in that. We dress a girl and what society says girls should be and how they're supposed to look, and and many of them fall right in line with that. The same with our males. And we all know how dangerous toxic masculinity is, not in just big outbreaks of violence, but in men that are not feeling as though they can express themselves because it doesn't check the box, or that may look gay, or that's too feminine. And, we already understand, we can see the dynamic of why these hard-nosed gender roles are being challenged right now in a much bigger way. We've got kids that are identifying, they're saying, "Hey, I don't want to be conformed and stuck in any box." So we see a lot of non-binary young people and children coming out in the world right now saying, "Hey, I just want to be me." And that is which. Yes. Oh, Ryan has a great statements. Yep. Can you see that? I
Yep.
like that.
Humans fear what
It's
cannot
so
be
very true, because it
defined.
is from caveman days. Yeah, it's absolutely. And so, we see a lot of this happening in the world, and of course we're very tempted to get into fear. We're very tempted to roll out, the protests, and to say this is not natural. But again, you know, if it were working, I have to think that maybe we would not be here to witness and to be a part of some of this. I know as a child, I certainly wish that this was not the case. I certainly spent far too much of my life, being depressed about what I felt like I did not have the ability to change. And we are seeing a big controversy right now in the medicating of trans children. And, I don't mind having a very candid discussion with you
Right.
about that, because, I myself am on the fence, but I think it's like anything and everything. Every child who identifies as trans is not going to identify as trans for the rest of their life. But do we not treat, those that will be trans for the rest of their life? I mean, how do we go about this? How do we decide without setting ourselves in the seat of divinity to decide who's going to be trans forever and who's going to be trans for a while? How do you feel about this coming from a medical background?
Yeah, I think it's very individual. I think that, or, I know that there's a lot of counseling. We've mentioned this before. There's a lot of counseling that goes along with these tough decisions with, families, parents, and the kids.
Mhm.
I totally agree. We can't just leave it up to the kids. but they do have to be involved in the conversation. They do have, no matter how old they are, they have to be involved in the decision making process because it's their bodies. Even
Yeah.
if they're, 8 years old, 9 years old, 10 years old, it's still their body. It's their own being, and they need to be, educated, make an informed decision, and not just leave it to them, but have the counselors and the medical people talk to them in a way that they can understand. Of course, I don't think that they can fully understand because we all know that,
Yeah.
when you're 10 years old, there's no way you can really look ahead and have any idea what's going to be going on in your life at age 30, 20,
Yeah.
40.
Yeah, for
So,
sure.
but there's a there's a lot of counseling and discussion that needs to happen around it, and it's very individual. If I do feel like it's it's not as bad as so many people want to say to to have those puberty um halting
Blockers. Yeah.
blockers. There you go,
Yeah.
blockers. The puberty blockers, because as soon as they go off of those, they're going to start their normal, regular puberty process. And
Yeah.
so the worst that happens is that it's delayed. So you
Correct.
have, a 16, 17, 18-year-old female who was, when she was younger, really felt strongly that she might be a male in a female's body, but then for, going through this time, realized, that she maybe would like to be female after all, or she does feel more female now that she is older, maybe. So, so we have somebody that is just starting to grow their breasts and just starting to get
Mm-hmm.
more curvy when they're 16 or 17 or 18 rather than, 12, 13, 14. Big deal,
Correct.
right? I mean, what's the
Yeah.
big deal about it? I don't know. Um, so I don't think it's, I don't think it's worth the huge controversy, honestly. But I also don't think we should just hand them out to every little kid that thinks they're, that they're in the wrong gender body.
Yeah.
Um, there needs to be a lot of counseling. There needs to be a lot of talk around these situations and these for these kids. And I think now is a good time too to bring up these. There's these books. It's at akidsbookabout.com,
Mm-hmm.
and they have all kinds of things, but they also have a kids book about transgender, a kids book about non-binary, and and then even gay and bisexual and all of this. And this will help not only the kids but the parents to get a good idea, because there are some books out there. There's some books about having the same gendered parents and stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
but there's not a lot. And I do think that
Yeah.
I have not personally looked at these books. I will say that right off the bat. I did look at the website, and it seems very, they seem like very good resources for kids that aren't just like, little kid books,
Yeah.
some of them are for,
Yeah.
maybe a young adult. So, that's a good resource there. Um, so yeah, so I think that there just needs to be a lot of discussion around it and
Yeah.
counseling. Yep.
And I also think that we also have to look at what type of information are we thinking from a place of misinformation too, because when we think about when in the big controversy and they're talking about these very young kids getting hormone blockers, well, that's not really the case either, because they're not 6 and 7 and 8 getting hormone blockers. In fact, they have to show that puberty has begun
Mm, okay.
before those blockers are even administered. So
Okay.
they don't just get to go in and, so a lot of misinformation, like what the mass media and does a lot is instill fear, especially for whatever agenda that it's coming from, which I think
Right.
is a beautiful time of our awakening as we're beginning to see agendas a lot clearer
Hmm.
and making our own choices. So we have to, number one, look at the source where it's coming from and
Absolutely.
see that, not just grab a hold. If COVID's taught us anything, it should be that, not to just grab onto fear, because that's the
Yeah.
first thing served up, and so that's the same with this situation, and the
Mhm.
information is out there, and there's a very easy ability to grab a hold of it. So what's happening really is, this kid has probably been talking about being in the wrong body for plenty of, for this
Yeah.
age group of young kids. They've been talking about this or living in this way for quite a
Right.
while. So,
You mean children that
it's
are already starting puberty?
children.
Yeah.
Yeah, from by the time they get by the time they're going for blockers,
Yeah.
you can have a pretty good idea about who's going to stay in and who's maybe having some outside influence or
Right.
being influenced by stories or something,
Mhm.
by how long they've already identified this. And also, we have to bring up the truth is that some kids will change their mind because,
Yeah.
let's just go on and be real, it's not easy at any age in this time and that we're in this paradigm of thought
Mhm.
to transition your gender. There's just not, it's never going to be easy.
I
And
think that
so,
kids and when you talk about young teens, they're already, I mean, just that age group alone, you're going through different identity, not necessarily
yeah,
crisis, but you're coming into your own, you're becoming your own person a little bit more, you're coming into, you know, um, you're questioning or exploring your own feelings about yourself, about your body, about who you're attracted to. All of this is happening to everybody during
yeah,
puberty. So absolutely depend there's going to be influence depending on where you're at, depending on the circle you're in and the location and everything. There's going to be influence now that it's a lot more, when I was a teen, I've never heard of transgender or, or some of
yeah,
these other
unfortunately, me
terms.
either.
Yeah, so but now that this is a lot more in the media and we have internet now, which we didn't have when I was that age. So I
All
mean,
right,
these kids know about all this stuff, and so they're more aware. So they're going to maybe use these words and
true.
also, look into themselves when they're questioning things, they're going to look into themselves. Um, but it's hard to know. I don't think there's any way to know. I think it's a very individual who's,
Yeah.
you know, really going to feel the same way 10 years down the road and who's just kind of trying this on.
Yeah, for sure. Because it can be said too that, new things become trendy as
Right.
well. And that's with all new things. It's not just with, and of course, lesbian, gay, and bisexual and transgender is not anything new. It's just that
Right.
it is, of course, more, you know, out there to be talked about. And let's
Right.
not forget, as much as, that angers some people, it saves other people's lives.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of life saving that goes on by having candid conversations. And I think this is a good
Mhm.
time to really lead us into how, as a parent, you
Mhm.
can now go through this if you have a child that is identifying as transgender, even non-binary. We can even talk about that because, again, that skews the gender roles that most parents have been, at their age have been brought up to know about. And so, one of the things in all things, parental is you're going to have to put in a great effort to be your child's greatest ally. And I don't think that that means just jumping on every bandwagon of whim, but
Right.
your child, and it's very important to, yeah, that would be awesome, Ryan. That would be amazing. Um, that I think that it really does. Again, we have to go back to individual, that we have to go back to knowing your child, and also when this happens, being able to go within yourself and ask yourself, what about this like I said in the
Right.
very opening, every time something is presented in your reality, it is an opportunity for you to expand or
Right.
retract. And, retraction, in my experience, has just brought it back again with more reinforcements and more reinforcements. So it's an opportunity for you to expand as a human being as well. And so a good, perfect place to start would be to ask those hard questions of yourself.
Right.
Why does this bother me so
Mhm.
bad? What's the fear here? Is it how I'm going to look to my friends, neighbors, family? Is it also is it and or I'm afraid for what my child's now going to go through? Um, is it, and it could be just a whole bunch of things, but I think that it's very important for one to ask themselves, because in order to be an ally for somebody else, you've got to be pretty strong within yourself.
Yeah.
You can't
Yeah.
stand in the gap for your child if you're not even sure what gap you're standing in. And if you side with the people that are against this, how can you stand with them? So
For
I
your
think that it's
child.
very
Yeah.
important. Yeah, it's very important. You may be their lifeline. You may
Yeah.
be their only lifeline,
I
you
think
know.
people don't realize the amount of, and again, this is something I bring up every time, but it's so important, the amount of children that, attempt suicide because they're not accepted by their families and their loved ones. And these
Yes.
are transgender, the transgender children are the ones that are of the highest rate of suicide, attempts or even become a victim of suicide. And it's,
Mhm.
because they're not accepted or they're told to hide it or, or they don't feel comfortable or safe even. So they
Yeah.
they choose death over having to live a life in a body that's they're not comfortable with, that they don't know, they don't feel right
Yeah.
within. And that is, that's the huge thing for me, is how, I can't imagine, children even considering suicide, let alone, being victims of suicide. um I think that parents don't need to fully understand, because I can see where parents would say, I don't understand this, and then argue and argue and argue with the child. You don't have to understand. What you have to do is be there for your child, love your child through the process. If you don't understand, your child might not be able to explain it. Look outside. If you're the parent, that's your job.
Yeah.
Look where you can to find that information, or ask
Yes.
the doctors or the counselors, if you're already seeing them. Ask them, where can I get resources on this to get some
Yes.
factual information. And
Yes.
yeah.
Absolutely. And what may not exist so much right now are parent support groups for
Mm,
having trans children. And I hope that, that it will become a much more common
yeah.
situation and place, because I think that, it's just like in the recovery in the active addiction and recovery world. When families have a child that is, becomes addicted to a substance, a habit, anything, they fail to realize that it is a family issue, that it is
Right.
not just an issue, a very isolated issue with this one person. And unfortunately, it took us a very long time, and we've lost a lot of human beings and had many torn apart families before we started kind of coming to the place where we began to really start finding counseling and support groups for families of, in addiction. And because when we fix, everything starts with a family unit,
Yeah.
whether it's a separated family unit or not, or it's no family unit, either or. The root of every human being that's sitting here today with what all we're going through begins in that root of that family foundation. And so what do we want to see in the world? Is it so much more important for us to hold on to these old, outdated ideas and paradigms of living and being when we continuously see that they're not working? Or do we decide that love is more important and building a strong foundation in order to, because let us also put it this way, for every child that's in the world, we are helping to raise the next adult.
Right.
So it has everything to do with what we are creating, is how, what type of adults that we have coming out into the world. That's up to us, and we have a great, huge, influence in this. And it's got to be said and it's got to be seen. And so, do you want to put another child out into the world that is abused, alone, that has the type of self-esteem where they do get bullied, and they are, they have, they're more at risk for violence, because we know predators seek out prey. And if we, anyone out in this audience has experienced any type of abuse as a child, then you already know, especially sexual abuse. There is predator and there's prey. And, I myself was prey. So even for me in my childhood, I had a lot of complex things going on. Well, that creates an adult with a lot of complex trauma and disorder going on too. So we also have to, I think it offers us this opportunity to learn that we are not our bodies. Like, the essence of who we are has
Mhm.
nothing to do with our body, has nothing to do with our thoughts. Even, it has nothing to do with that divine part of us. And I think when we have a child that presents as something different than maybe our picture for them, it's an amazing opportunity for us to realize love goes deeper than this outside structure. And maybe that could be the most important lesson of all of this for the next generation of human beings, to grow up confident and, loving and more willing to have more empathy and show compassion for their fellow human beings, versus the way we are now, which is, keep all vulnerability at bay. And so I think, you mentioned that puberty has its own distresses on
Mhm.
its own. I want to talk just a little bit about some of the things that parents can be maybe watching for or be sensitive to, as if they have a trans child going through puberty. I know for me it was a very dreaded situation. I thought this was going to come on and come on fast. I remember having talks about what was going to happen, those talks our parents have with us about, this is part of growing up and this is what's going to happen. And I remember being so devastated when those things started taking place. So depression and that suicidal tendency, or that feeling of hopelessness, is very real. And in a trans child ready to go through puberty, I think this is why blockers have become so important, because this can be a major distress in a young person's life. And this is where we start to find a lot of those suicidal attempts, or, you know, achieving that awful place. So I think that I've written down some things that parents can actually be aware of, start to look for, and they're regular things like anything a child's going through. But look for a change in their grades. You can look for a change in, are they not wanting to go to school? Are they wanting to do things less? I remember at a certain time I would not go out to a restaurant with my family. I stayed home to the point with that it was excessive, and I stayed in my room constantly. There was just no time that I felt okay to be around my family, hang out in my family, go out in public. I would do my best to stay home from school. My grades were terrible. I didn't because I would never ask questions, and again, that's making for a person with no self-esteem, no self-worth.
Right,
So that
you
brought me
didn't
on.
wanna be seen, so you couldn't,
Not, yeah,
raise your hand or go up.
nothing,
Yeah.
nothing. Yeah, and didn't really feel like there was a safe place for anyone to
Yeah.
talk to
Mhm.
during that time too. Yeah, watch for habit changes, friendship changes. Do you start to
Mhm.
see the friends that this child grew up with? Now they're starting to, break away from each other.
Their interests maybe?
Yes, absolutely. Their interests, isolations, again, not wanting to go to school. Um, there's a lot of little things that we can become extremely aware of to get out in front of helping, get out in front of these things with our children, because we all know that life changes, bodies changes, and now that there is a solution, no matter how bad you don't want it to be, there's a solution, and that offers hope, and it's not worth having them make a permanent decision for something that can be remedied at
Halted,
some
yeah.
some point. Yeah, for sure. And so I will put this back up as well, for
Yeah,
parents.
that's
If you're
important.
if, Yeah, call the Trevor Project is an amazing resource for young LGBTQ plus, especially trans youth. They are especially geared towards the youth, and they're an amazing resource, and have resources wherever you are in the world. They can tell you the closest places that you can actually find resources for your child. There's also for trans specific care, and this is for adults or young people. You can reach out to the Trans Lifeline, and that's run by trans volunteers. And so you're going to be talking to all trans people when you call that Trans Lifeline. And if you're feeling suicidal, please reach out to that National Suicide Hotline. It is not worth taking your beautiful life. There's so much for you to offer, or you wouldn't even be here. So embrace that part of you. And I want to say to also to parents, we want to talk a little bit about how you can become a good ally to your child. And this is going to take some work. Let's just be honest. You're
Mhm.
not going to wake up and hear that now your child is trans, they're trapped in the wrong body, and you're just going to be like gung ho. All right. It's going to take a little bit of time. And I'm working on having a parent of a trans child actually come on the show as well and talk to us about their struggle and how they do things. But look up the policies at your child's school. Do they have an anti-bullying policy? That's a big situation, because you may have to step in and be their voice, help them be
Yeah.
heard if
Some
they're too
schools
afraid.
now do have teachers that are, of the LGBTQ community and
Yes.
are able to be, seen as that way. Whereas,
Yes.
in our age,
Yeah.
when we were in school, if you were, you better hide it because you would probably be
Absolutely.
fired. And
Absolutely.
not that they're teaching anything, but they're just visible. They're just
Mhm.
there showing themselves. And if the kids ask anything, then they already know how to address this without stepping in over any toes of any parents or anything, but just to be there
Right.
to show that
Just
people are in the community that are
yeah.
LGBTQ, and these
Yep.
are great people just like everybody else, the people in your
Absolutely.
neighborhood, like Mr. Roger
Absolutely.
said. But
Absolutely.
I'd like to also say that parents can be, there's things that they can do. It's not just abuse that will
Mhm.
cause kids to sort of hide who they are. It doesn't have to be abuse. It can be even, if the parents are, saying little things like, big boys don't
Yes.
cry, man up, don't run like a girl, you hit the ball like a girl, all
Mhm.
these little things that they grew up hearing, and they don't think that it's harmful. But a
Mhm.
child who is feeling that they're not the gender that they're presenting as, that can be very damaging. It just
Absolutely.
takes a sentence, it just takes a word, and then so just be mindful of what you're saying around your children. Like even as they start to come of age and that you notice some of their friends are dating and maybe they're not, you might want to mention something, rather than using the term boyfriend or girlfriend, you could use the term partner or just date. Are you going on any dates? Have any, would you like to ask somebody for a date, or is there a special person that you're interested in? Or just, think twice before you automatically assume that they want to date the opposite sex. Think
Yeah,
twice about that. Um, and even if that doesn't feel comfortable to you, because we have to also think of the parents, before the children were born. They know, oh my gosh, my little girl, my baby girl, and they start thinking of names and they start buying the clothes. And it's, we have to also be aware of how the parents are feeling. And
sure.
we both know, we've heard of parents who have a hard time. They misgender their
Mm-hmm.
children even after full transition. But, this, since before they were born, it's been a little girl or a little boy, because
Yeah.
they find out on the ultrasound, and that's the biggest thing, in pregnancy, these gender reveal parties and stuff. It's a big deal now. So, and back when I was born, and even when my kids were born, we didn't find out the gender until
Mm-hmm.
after they were born. And in my nursing career, I've seen some, intersex babies, babies born that they couldn't really tell. And
Yes.
there was some issues, physically, that they couldn't tell. So you just kind of wait and see what happens, or they decide to do surgery. And at that point, then, you know, that's a whole nother show, a whole nother issue. But, but,
Well, it's good to know, though. It's good to talk about that because people
yeah,
think it's such a cut and dry
and it's
issue,
totally
and
not.
it's not, because I myself have, have been born with a certain different type of genetic, what they deemed a
Hmm.
disorder, in that it's got a long name that I cannot actually say, but it is it is a type of that, intersexed. And so we have to, remind ourselves that, when we say this is a choice and people aren't born this way, that's not true.
Right,
And people are born all types of different ways, and we've got to remind ourselves that just because it's not within our awareness doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. And I think you've made
right.
a very valid point in that, just like in the addiction and recovery world, we cannot forget about the parents, and the parents need their own proper time to
Yeah.
grieve and to make, to be as healed as they can be. Because like we were
And
saying,
these
you can't.
support groups, like you said,
Yeah,
we need to look at that. Yeah.
yeah, for sure. And I really want to bring, on some, trans youth that are going through at a certain age. Of course, we have to have them be 18, or if they're a little older, they come on
Yeah.
with their parent, which that's what I'm trying to work on, is
Hmm.
to get a pretty popular mom and son team to
Hmm.
come on the show and talk to us about their experiences. And so we're working on that. We're really
Yes.
working on that. And Pam, you made a beautiful point about being very mindful about the things that we say, because
Mhm.
when we do have a child that's hypersensitive and really wondering about their own identity and feeling different and shamed, it's small little things that they can catch on to, and that makes a subconscious, foundation, and then that program begins to change. And so that goes along with the transphobic attitudes about
Yeah.
making, jokes about trans people, or using
Yeah.
derogatory language about trans people, or gay, bisexual, non-binary human beings. I mean, it's
I
it's it's a
think there
bigger
are
deal than we think.
people who don't even think that they're transphobic, or people who don't think that
Yeah.
they're being, phobic, transphobic or LGBTQ phobic, or any of that. They don't think that they are, but their language shows that they are. But they
Right.
would say, "Oh, it doesn't matter to me." They would say, you know, whatever they say, they think that they're
Right.
an ally, they think that they're a
Right.
supporter, and when it comes down to it, there's just little jokes, little things that are
Yep.
said, and that's when, and I'm not saying that these people are purposefully trying to put the wool over, people's eyes, but they're also, I think that they might not be aware
Correct.
themselves of some of the
Right.
damaging
Correct.
words that they're saying, or little jokes, or things that they're saying.
Correct.
So
Correct.
it's really a matter, as you've said, so many times, that looking within ourselves and being mindful of what we're saying, and what we're putting out there, and do our attitudes in our heart and our soul match what is being
Yeah.
shown, what we say and what we do out in, whether it's online and social media, or to our friends and our family. What are we presenting compared to what's really in our heart and soul, and
Yeah.
who are we, where do we stand on issues? And again, when just saying that made me feel like that's such a divide. And you know I don't think it's necessarily, standing on a side of an issue or anything, but it's, if
Right.
there's something that you don't understand, or you're feeling like there's a conflict there within you, that's up to you to take a look at, to take a look inside and educate yourself. Whether it's,
Right.
just watching these, just watching these episodes is just the beginning. It's just touching on things here and there
Yeah.
for you to then go out and say, I didn't think about that, or I didn't know about that, or let me dig deeper. And you can do the legwork. We're also
Right.
trying to find more and more resources all the time for you guys, but
Yeah,
it's
for
up to
sure.
you as well. We all have
Yeah,
to
for
do our own
sure.
research. Yeah.
And I think just in the world and in general at this time, I mean, let us not be afraid to accept that shadow side of us. We're
Right.
all born both with, darkness and light. That's the duality of being human. And, for us to be able to see that within ourselves doesn't equal us to shame ourselves because it exists. It
Yeah.
probably exists because of something that you heard growing up that was
Right.
became so common. It's the same as, and this is pretty extreme, but it's the truth. It's the same with, a lot of people my age and older and even younger in living in the South. You hear there's nobody that hasn't heard the N word in a derogatory manner about, minorities, us black minorities. You hear that, and you may not believe that there's any racism or prejudice that lives within you. But, you know, that's a word that is so openly thrown around throughout the South that a person can say that without even honestly being conscious
Right.
that they are saying it in that way.
Right.
And so, you know, just being aware of that, it's the same little things. We all grab on to certain things over habit of a lifetime, just
Right.
over and over and
And
over.
that's the thing. It's sort of, brainwashed into us without even realizing it.
Right.
It's
Right.
it's not
Program.
necessarily your own thoughts or your own feelings about certain people or certain groups of people. It's just something that's in there because you've always heard it.
Right.
It's always
Right.
been there in the background, like you said. What's interesting is you were mentioning in the beginning how, we have this dynamic of, you being a trans man and me being, and I pointed this way, but that's just the camera's odd. You're really, but
Right.
but you're a trans man, and I'm a gendered woman, and um but also I'm in California, which
Yeah.
we are like the most open state probably,
Correct.
and where
Yeah.
you are is probably, one of the most repressed states.
Very.
So
Yes,
that's
very.
another interesting thing, because things
Very.
that you have said to me, off of the show, that you hear in the background and stuff, I never hear any of that. I never
Yeah.
hear any of that. And I'm in Northern California, and it's even more sort of open, and just it's not even it's not even noticed or recognized in more southern California. Or I don't know, I'm thinking like San Francisco is not necessarily Southern California like LA or anything, but
Mhm.
LA is a whole different story. But but like like in San Francisco, and it's just really very open to anything and everything, and nobody bats
Mhm.
an eye. Nobody
Yeah.
bats an eye. And I
It's
here in,
amazing.
Sacramento area, I don't hear any racial stuff. I don't hear any, if I went to the grocery store, I would not be in the least bit surprised to see two women, holding hands, or a family with two men and some children, or even a man that is, obviously looks male dressed as a female. It wouldn't even, I could see that next time I go to the store. It wouldn't be out of place. So that's
Yeah.
a totally different environment than your
Yeah.
environment.
And it makes a big difference, and it makes a big difference in the trauma and the dynamic of that family system, because a lot of, families that have, in especially in my area and other southern areas, um, families that have trans children, that parent now has to fight the rest of their family. Maybe that,
Right.
parents and the grandparents and the cousins and all of this. Exactly. Ryan says groupthink. That's exactly the truth.
Right.
And it's very profound in this area, that it's very closed off and not accepted, and that this is allowed. And trans is just one of the things. This is a
Right.
very closed off area, and it's also a very religious area, so there's a lot of shame and persecution for
Mhm.
everything that a lot of people see as a moral failing and may not ever understand. And I think that is a good way to lead into how to actually overcome some of those transphobic
Mhm.
attitudes, if you're a trans person or an ally, even because as an ally, these things are going to affect you,
Yeah.
as you opening yourself to say, look, I'm an ally to all people, because that's how I feel.
Right.
I'm an ally to all humans. I would love to live in a world where humans actually treated one another with the utmost, respect and
Compassion, and yeah.
yeah, I mean, why not? We are
The way you want to be
one
treated.
species.
What a
Absolutely.
concept.
Yeah, we are one species, we are
Yeah.
each individual, and I think that's what makes us so exciting to, be in this world inhabiting together. But a lot of people don't, and they don't want to see things that are different than them, and they judge it right away off the top. That's wrong, that's bad,
Right.
and it
Dismiss.
can be very violent.
Yeah.
And so I think one of the ways to really, the first thing ever before we even start talking about how to try to overcome some of these attitudes is, number one, check your safety.
Mm.
That's a big issue for me. Every day that I go out of the house, I have to live in a manner that is always watching my peripheral. It's just like being on the street in active addiction in very dangerous situations. I must know, where I am at all times. I must know who's around me. I must, be able to listen to people's
Yeah.
conversations to know if that's dangerous, because a lot of times those conversations will get louder, about issues, that pertaining to what they think is me, or my people, or whatever. And people don't, that's the norm here. It's not the other way around. That's the norm. So, you have to be aware. And so all just be aware of your safety before you begin
Right.
to either, take a teaching moment. You've got to judge a
Yeah.
situation. You got to
Mhm.
judge another person's,
Yeah, we
because it's
we
not
don't
worth
want
it.
anybody, there's in June, it's Pride month and stuff in
Mhm.
June, and it's definitely, I don't think there's anybody that's trying to push anybody out
Right.
of, I don't want to say the closet, but push anybody out of into a dangerous situation. If
Right.
you're not safe,
Right, for
even
sure.
within your family, even within wherever you live, if you're not
Yeah.
safe, don't do something because you feel like you have to show who you
Exactly.
are, or
Exactly.
whatever the reason, safety first, always, always,
Always.
no
Always,
matter
at
the
all
situation.
times.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. Um, and that's the same, be a light and take
Mhm.
opportunities, when it's safe for you to let that
Yeah.
be a teaching moment. If somebody has, said something that, you can gauge their heart, meaning that this is probably something they've heard, something they don't
Mhm.
realize is transphobic, then you can take that moment. But judge it. If it's somebody that you think it's not going to make one bit of difference in the world at all, then don't put
Right.
yourself at risk in order
Mhm.
to, do that. And, you know, always build the confidence and the stability within yourself from the inside out. Look, transitioning your gender is not going to solve all of your
Right.
issues. If you are over 18 or probably even over 12 and you have known that you were trans or different for a long time, the likelihood that you're carrying around some trauma and some self-worth issues and different things is pretty likely. So work on those.
Yeah.
You can't properly stand up for something if you're completely identified with I'm a trans man and that's it, because
Right.
then when somebody challenges that or gives me their opinion about trans people and me included, then of course I'm going to be completely upset. I'm going to double down on that identity and I'm going to fight like hell and I'm going to be the one to walk around, angry, hurt and upset all the time, and that's not a way to live either.
No.
So
Develop the
build
whole
that
of your
up.
being. Yeah. So you know who
Absolutely.
you are more than who your body is, regardless of
Right.
gender or gender identity. Develop your
And
whole of your being. Yeah.
and the biggest thing that kind of that one situation, the biggest thing that takes care of is you don't have to be one of those people that now has to detransition,
Mm,
and have transition regret
yeah.
because you've now built your happiness
Yeah.
upon this physical manifestation, which,
Right.
never external is never going to fulfill
No.
internal happiness. We've
And
talked
it's
about
just like
that on every platform.
recovery. I mean, people
Yes,
recover, they go through recovery, addiction recovery, and they realize they still have problems. There's still things that they have
exactly.
to deal with, or that they were, avoiding for so long.
Without a
That's
doubt.
the addiction is not the problem, is not the
Yes.
issue. You're off of, any substance abuse, and you still have life to deal with.
Absolutely. That's the whole difference in
Right.
being just getting clean and sober and
Right.
actually being in recovery is you got to go deeper into that healing so that you take
Yeah.
care of those roots and those causes. So, don't forget
Right.
that you are a whole entity and like Pam said, work on your whole
Yeah.
being.
And
And,
Ryan says that he was interacting with a queer woman, and she also mentioned the safety, something that he takes
wow.
for granted as a cis male, and that is
Oh,
not just for a queer woman. Like, for
yeah.
me, my husband and I go out for walks at night, something I would never do alone,
Yeah.
never. Very scary for a woman anywhere, really.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I love walking at night. I love the nighttime. I love the night sky, and
Mhm.
I love walking, and we've started doing that. But
Thank you.
yeah, it's
Bye.
something that.
Yeah, I thank Ryan for saying that
Mhm.
to be able to say that is something that I take for granted,
Yeah.
is an amazing like expansion within itself. And sometimes it only takes that one thing to say, "She's, I didn't even
Right.
think about that.
Right.
This is
To turn
something
on
I
a
take for
little
granted."
spark in your mind and go,
Yeah.
wow. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's how a person begins to become like an
Yeah.
ally to many different types of human beings, and I think that's a very strong thing to say, and it's very telling. I think we can learn a lot from that statement that Ryan
Yeah.
just put out.
Good
I
for
think
you,
we could learn
Ryan.
a lot. Yeah, for our own vulnerability,
Yeah.
to really take a look at that, because it's true. You know, I hear it a lot when people talk, when we're talking about race relations, and people say white privilege, and they say, "Well, what am I supposed to do? Feel guilty for being white?" No, it's not that. It's just what Ryan just did, just
Be
realizing that
aware.
other people are having other experiences in
Hmm.
life, and you can honestly be grateful for what you have. I can the same way. I know that the majority of the trans violence is being perpetrated upon trans women of color.
Hmm.
That's a very hard community to actually live and work. So many are homeless. They have to turn to sex work in order to survive. They have drug habits, because what else do you do in a hopeless situation,
And then that stigma just keeps growing,
just
that
keeps
the
growing.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and oftentimes when they are attacked in that line of work, then the stigma comes in again, and the police, say, well, it's your fault and
Yeah,
you shouldn't be here doing this. Well, they're not realizing what other choice have we given this human
right.
being. And so I think the world is changing, and
I
you
think it
know,
is too. Yeah,
I'm grateful to be doing this, and to
me
have so
too.
many people here with us that are willing to open up and look at themselves and look at their lives, and see how they can just be, an even better human being, like you and I try to be every single day. I certainly don't have it down, and I've noticed
We never will.
through a lot of the sessions that we've done, a lot of things that I am seeing emerge in society today, that I'm having to visit my own biases. I'm having to visit my own places of things that I don't understand, and snap judgments. And I think it's very interesting. It's a challenge to me, because my goal is to be the best human being I can possibly be.
Yeah,
So, you know, parents, become your child's best ally. Be someone they can talk to, and if you just can't, help them find somebody. We all deserve to have a support network, a safe space. And people with children, all types of people with all types of children, we are raising the next generation of adults, and
yeah,
unless we want them to continue the same stereotypes and the same things that aren't working, let's try to be more present, more, there, and in ways that we can, overcome learn how to identify transphobic attitudes. And um before we go, I do want to share a couple things about how you and I, how we all can help stop transphobia. Because yep, we do have that much power. So I'm going to read this just the way I've written it, so I do not forget a thing. Don't use slurs against transhumans. Like Pam said, watch those jokes. Watch things that we just have grown up to say. Don't be afraid to apologize when you make a mistake. Don't ask personal questions of a trans person regarding their genitalia or surgery or their sex life or their, dating attractions, unless they have opened up this line of communication with you. As curious as you may be, imagine, would you ask someone else that question?
right,
So
right.
don't do that.
And you
Um,
can ask us because we can discuss these things. That
yes,
you are afraid
absolutely.
to ask somebody that you know. If you're afraid to ask
Absolutely.
them or you're not sure if you should, that you're curious about, send us a message and we'll address it.
Absolutely. We certainly will. We'll do an entire show about it, and we'll try to make that understanding more available. Avoid insulting compliments. Now, this is one that people might not think that is insulting, but to say something like, you look like a real girl or a real boy,
Mm.
or I would have never known you were transgendered, or you're too pretty to be trans,
Ugh,
or any of those things, where you may believe
terrible.
that that's a
Oh
compliment.
my
It's
gosh.
really not. It's very
Ugh,
dehumanizing. um,
can't
don't
believe it.
believe stereotypes or make assumptions. We are all unique. So let's avoid that. Be a vocal supporter of the trans community, regardless of your gender or age. Let trans people in your life know that you are a friend, that you are an ally, that you're a safe space. Educate yourself on trans issues. Don't get in conversations about medicating trans kids unless you honestly have done some research. Don't fall into that, that stereotypical conversation that people are having out of fear. Educate yourself. You may be the light within that darkness to someone else. Um, Respect someone's decisions about when and where they come out. Like, don't out
Absolutely.
somebody else.
Whew,
Just don't. That's not your business and it's
that
not your
happens a
place.
lot. Yeah.
It happens way too much.
Yeah.
And I
I've
my
heard about that
wife
a lot.
lost a job uh, for that.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's serious. People's livelihoods are at stake and their safety is at stake. You never know
Right.
who's listening and who hears you. Um, if you don't know someone's preferred pronouns or their name, ask them. Use gender neutral language, they, them, folks. I have a bad habit of saying guys a lot. I always say guys. I'm working on that. Um, Respect chosen pronouns regardless of someone's appearance.
Yes.
They don't have to look feminine to you if
Right.
they are identifying as feminine. If they ask you to use that pronoun, just use it. It's the same as someone just blatantly using your wrong gender.
Right.
Treat how you want to be treated. Let's see. Being trans is, but remember this especially, being trans is but one part of a person's life. It is not all that they are about. And if you are trans and you don't really realize that yourself, if you only surround yourself with trans people and do trans things and watch trans shows and all of that stuff, remember that you are building an identity that is not complete. It's not everything you are. And that's the same for the public. And to address transphobia, if you happen to be in that situation, whether you are an ally or that person, don't insult back. That's the thing. Someone insults in that way, you're not doing any favors to
You're not
yourself,
helping the
them.
situation. Yeah.
Right. Don't insult them back. Be clear on why their words are aggressive or why their words are offensive. Be clear about that. Stand your ground, be clear, and decide if it's even safe to address in the first place.
Right.
I learned a long time ago that you can stand and scream your point until you pass out. But if somebody on the other side is not willing to hear that,
Hmm.
you're wasting your time. And so
Right.
have that judgment. And last but not least, if you mess up somebody's pronouns, fix it, apologize, and try to do the best you can.
Yeah.
And trans people, give them some slack, okay? We can be awful tough on human beings also. And I get it. I live it with y'all, coming from trauma. But we are also here for a purpose. And that purpose is to bring greater acceptance, awareness, and love to a world that is desperate in need for it. So, we can be not so as uptight and serious as well. You know, don't be walked on, but let's give people a chance. Let's give
Yeah.
people a chance. We're asking them to do the same thing. Thank you, Ryan, for being here tonight. I have absolutely enjoyed all of your comments and your questions and your ideas. I mean, you really, really have some amazing insights, and I'm grateful that you are here. To everyone
Join
else
the
that has joined us tonight, oh, go ahead.
join the
Go ahead.
group. The group
Yes.
on
Oh,
Facebook.
yes, Pamela. Please, please, please tell people how to join that group.
Well, go to Transgender Mentor page, and the group is posted like every other day on there. You just
Awesome.
have to join. If you can't find it, message me. I'm actually able to get a hold of much easier than Lona is. So message me. either on
Yep.
Breakthrough Hypnotherapy or Pamela Marie Topjian is what I am at on Facebook, or on Instagram, just Pamela Topjian, I believe. I don't think I have my middle name on Instagram. I'm not sure. But
I don't think
anyway,
so.
you can message me or even email hypnobreakthrough.com. Email me, Pamela at hypnobreakthrough. Um, yeah, and I'll hook you up to where you need to go.
Awesome,
So,
awesome,
yeah,
awesome, awesome. And it's a private group, so whatever you
private.
share in there stays in there. And we have rules that keep it that way for people's safety. We're trying to create a
Yes.
safe space for all human beings, for allies and people going through transition. There's a lot to it. It's far more than we can cover in an hour. So I'd be
Cool.
happy to do some groups there, some live, Zoom meetings on there if we have enough people that want to know more
Right.
about the transition process. The Transgender Mentor is not just a cute name. I do am absolutely willing to go into schools and medical professionals and businesses and talk about how we can all become more accepting of one another, of trans issues, and many different things. So if you need mentoring, just reach out through Pamela or to myself. And remember, healing is a whole absolute system. So think about how much your subconscious plays in your life and how it holds on to your trauma. And hypnotherapy is an amazing tool to help you heal that. And Pamela is far too modest to even say this, but she has been willing, so willing, to give a free session to all the Transgender Mentor listeners, as well as the Recovery Soul Food listeners. So make sure that you hit Pamela up. Her information is in the description of this video. Tell her that LC sent you, and she's going to give you a free full session. Also, she's doing some amazing hypnosis groups right now, some hypnotherapy groups. And really, you can come in, and it's upon donations. And so, you donate what you can, and you're going to get an amazing group hypnosis session. And it's I just think that what Pam is doing is helping to heal humanity one human at a time.
Thank you.
Remember, we
Thank
got to
you.
dig deep and heal ourselves from the inside out, not just
Yeah.
depend on that outside in. So if you're really looking to get way down deep into those places that seem to hold you back when you're trying to move forward, hook up with Pamela, because she is amazing at what she does. I can attest to that. My wife can attest to that, and many others. So, hypnobreakthrough.com. Pamela, thank you so
Thank
much once
you. Thank
again.
you.
It's been another amazing Sunday, and I'm
We could go
so,
on
so
forever.
grateful. I know. There's so much to talk about
Uh,
here.
there
It'll
is.
be nice when eventually there's not so much to talk about.
Right.
Like those will be the days when we can say, we've come to the end. Humanity is beautiful once again. Our job is done here.
Our job is done.
All right, everybody. Until next Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, y'all be so amazing. Be beautiful. Love yourselves and love each other. And Pamela and I will see you next Sunday. Bye.